It is morning and I have a sore throat and my nose is running. I have to be at work in an hour. It's probably going to rain.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
This is not a commentary on how the instant we become adults, people think we're suddenly waterproof, or the fact that we're all practically slaves to the corporate system. No. I am nowhere near mentally ready to talk about that. This is a video about all the books that I read in January. So last month, I actually participated in the VSCO Girls Readathon. This was created by Chanel from Chanel Time and co-hosted by Catherine from X Catherine Reads, Hannah from Snow White Reader, and Jasmine from More the Books. There are a lot of roosters crowing outside, and y'all just have to deal with it because I can't really tell them to shut up. So the VSCO Girls Readathon is inspired by the VSCO Girls aesthetic, and there are categories inspired by this aesthetic, and so these categories are also a basis from which I can base my TBR from. And so these are the books that I read in January. This is Cookie Crisp, by the way. The first book on this list is Becoming by Michelle Obama. I read this for the categories a book loved by one of your faves, and this was Cindy from Read with Cindy. This was one of her favorite books of 2019. I also read this for the category a non-fiction or nostalgic book. This is a memoir, and so I read it. This book, wow, this was just such an amazing book, and I had a lot of fun reading it. Reading this book was just like talking to a friend. I honestly felt like me and Michelle just sat down for merienda and we just talked the whole day away. There's just something about her writing that's so uninhibited and honest. She's not hesitant to share what she thinks we should hear or know about her, and what really struck out to me was that she would share things even if these particular things will take away from her image. An example of these things that I'm talking about is that she was not ashamed or hesitant to admit that she failed the bar exam the first time she took it, and that she admitted that she wasn't necessarily as academically gifted as her peers, that she had to put in the time and the effort and the hard work to catch up with them in school. The way she was so directly honest that she didn't even try to sugarcoat how hard she had to work just to keep up. It just made her more endearing to me, because Michelle Obama is practically on a pedestal in my mind. I admire her so much. And to read about her just being so honest about who she is and what she had to go through, it just made me like her more. Reading this and getting to know more about her, it made her more approachable, more relatable in my eyes. I mean, she already was before, but this is just, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but it just cemented a closer connection between me and her. I swear I'm not being dramatic. I just love this book so much. And I really admire Michelle. I admire how she kept her grace and her integrity even through all the things she's been through. And of course, being her own self, despite being married to the President of the United States. Speaking of Barack Obama, I found Michelle's commentaries on their relationship so adorable. And I also found some commentaries about him particularly adorable, and these are some of the things that just really stood out to me about what Michelle said to him. So of course there was that one chapter where the first sentence was,
Barack Obama was late on the first day.
He was 10 minutes late, y'all. The next was when Michelle described Barack's room during his stay in Chicago, and it was basically the quintessential instant noodle college lifestyle. Like the fridge is empty, there's barely any furniture, and if there is, it's old and dirty, and the fact that the bed is just on the floor, like, that's the quintessential college lifestyle, or at least the college lifestyle that I'm familiar with. The next is Brock's Datsun car, the one with the hole on the passenger side. It reminded me of these old jeepneys here in the Philippines. I once rode this jeep that had this huge gaping hole where my feet should be. So I was tiptoeing. My feet were tiptoeing near my seat just so they wouldn't fall through the hole. It was an experience that you quickly get used to the more you commute here in the Philippines. The next was when they were talking about how they would make money for the campaign, and Barack just nonchalantly said, well, I'll just write a bigger book. The optimism of someone to just say he'll write a book so they'll have money, it's just... And of course, Michelle's commentary on how Barack is such a slow walker. This is equal parts adorable and frustrating for me because I'm a fast walker. If I'm with a slow walker, it's... I'm sorry, I'm a fast walker. I'm a bitter and unhappy person. I have to walk fast because I need to get to work on time so that I can stress out about work on time. Because the only thing worse about stressing about work is stressing about work while you're late.
Your behavior's not okay.
Really?
Yeah, it's not okay.
Why don't you have a piece of bread and maybe you'll calm down a little?
The next book that I read in January was We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. And I read this book for the categories a hard-hitting contemporary and a book with a gorgeous cover. And that is one gorgeous cover. Please refocus. So We Are Okay follows Marion, who left her hometown without giving any reason why. Like, she just suddenly disappeared, and now her best friend Mabel is going to visit her after months of not communicating or seeing each other. And so it's the story about two friends trying to reconcile, and about Marion, who's trying to come to terms about her grandfather's death and what this means to her and what her life will be now. Choosing this for a hard-hitting contemporary was the right choice because, yeah, it hit pretty hard. Like, this book did not have to go off on me like that. Wow. Let me start with the characters. For most of the book, we follow Marion and Mabel. Like, they're the two characters that we really just beat about. And I thought they were okay. Their characters weren't really given an introduction, but we got to know them as the book progressed. And what I liked was that it wasn't this in-your-face introduction like Marion is this and Mabel is that. We got to know them as we read the situations they were in and how they reacted to it. And it was just an immersive experience for me to get to know the characters like that. Next is the plot. So we followed this story basically in the span of 3 days. And, it's a short book. And literary-wise, I guess 3 days for a whole book sounds short. But for a book this thin, it just seems so long for me. It's so many things happened. I read about so many events in these two characters' lives, and I think that speaks about how well the plot was plotted. The plot was just, it was paced good and it was structured good. It was written in a way that it could fit as many events as possible, yet did not take away from the character's growth or the main story itself. Boys. Birds. And of course, the story. I already had an idea before picking up this book, but this was already sad. I just did not expect it to be this sad. A slight spoiler here. I'm not going to talk much about it. I'm just going to mention one detail. Yeah, Birdie. When I found out about Birdie, I just threw my glasses off and started crying. I'm not crying, I'm just holding back a sneeze. Because if I sneeze now, I'm never gonna stop sneezing throughout the video. What I really love about this story was that aside from being, sad, it also had this element of being mysterious and suspenseful because, as I said before, not everything was revealed from the start, so we don't actually know what is happening or what happened with Mabel until we get farther into the book, and even then the details are given sparingly. So by the time we finally get the whole picture, it's just such a it's just so mind-blowing, the impact that it had on me. I also liked how they dealt with Mabel and Marin's relationship here, because it was a very integral part of the story. I loved how they dealt with their romantic relationship with so much thoughtfulness, and how they still gave importance to their friendship. There are stories like that, and it was really nice to see that it was handled so delicately and so well. Like, not all relationships are straightforward and understandable. Relationships can be complex, they can be all shades of gray, and this was one of them. And I just really liked how they slowly and gradually dealt with it. The next book that I read in January was Landscape with Invisible Hand by M.T. Anderson. So I read this for the category A Book Out of Your Comfort Zone, and this is a sci-fi. I don't really read a lot of sci-fi, so out of my comfort zone. And I also read this for the category Pick a Random Book. So I had actually no plan of reading this last month, but it's thin, and so I thought, yeah, I could squeeze it in. Ooh, that rhymed. Bars. So this is sci-fi. This is a sci-fi set in a dystopian future where aliens came to Earth and they didn't invade us. Instead, they gave us this advanced technology to do what we will. And so this technology, kind of healed all sorts of diseases and made work 10 times better. But it also meant that a lot of people lost their jobs. And so it follows this character as he's trying to survive and help his family. I have a good story about this. So I rated this 2 stars in Goodreads, and it's not the book's fault, it's my fault, and I'll tell you why. So I read this and I did not like it. I was 3/4 done, I think. I was around here when I was just losing my patience and said, what is up with this book? I don't understand. Why are the characters like this? Why is everything like this? And so I hopped into Goodreads, checked out some reviews, and I was surprised to see how high this book is rated. And I saw my friends on Goodreads giving high ratings on this book. And I just had to find out what they saw in this book. And then I read it, and it just hit me. This is a sci-fi satire, and I didn't know that it was supposed to be satire. I did not pick up on that because I am uncultured and don't know any better. The moment I realized that this was a satire, it completely changed my reading experience. I had to think back to all of the pages and all the events and all the characters did before, and it all suddenly made sense to me. Like, of course they're like this, of course it happened like this, because it's a satire. So, in conclusion, the book isn't bad. I was just stupid. So yeah, after this I might have to bump my Goodreads rating higher, because honestly, finding out that this was a satire just made everything work. It just made everything click for me. That being said, satire or not, I still didn't like Chloe and Adam's relationship here, and how this became some sort of plot device for Adam's character. I know the characters are supposed to be exaggerated here, like their negative features are supposed to be exaggerated here, especially in this setting. The way Chloe was portrayed in contrast with Adam, because these are 2 characters in the same situation. And it just seemed like, again, satire or not, it just seemed like Chloe was being exaggeratedly portrayed negatively so that Adam would look good. I mean, Chloe wants better in life. There's nothing wrong with that. And she wants to make her own friends. There's also nothing wrong with that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if they wanted to give Adam some sort of motivation. I think something else would have been better, because this whole Chloe Adam thing, it just made both of them so unlikable, and it just didn't sit well with me. So that was what I really didn't like about the book. What I really liked about the book was that it talked and dealt with issues that are significant today, and I thought they brought it up really well. Well, of course, it's satire, so I guess it was so in your face, but also it just fit in with the world the story was set in and what was happening with the characters. In this sci-fi setting, it seemed sort of ridiculous, but at the same time, it seemed so believable. It was like watching a not so distant future, or more terrifyingly, the present. So these are some of the social issues that they tackled. They talked about shitty healthcare systems. They talked about the concern over the looming threat of automation, how it affects jobs and people. It talked about the ridiculous disparity between the rich and the poor. It also called out the recent notion of accusing or blaming poor people for being poor. And it's funny because there's this scene where a politician, I think it was a politician or a TV news anchor, was making comments about why poor people are still poor, and the news anchor practically said, well, yeah, you guys should just get up out of your couches and work. And it reminded me of this commentary in the news, like real life news, where this guy said that, people are poor and can't afford proper healthcare because they're too busy spending their money on phones. This trend of blaming poor people for their plight, it's not a good look. And I think the way the book handled this, the way it called out this idea, it was so in your face and somewhat funny, but also very triggering, and I thought that was effective. And of course, they talked about how wealthy people in power find ways to turn something that's supposed to be for the people into something they can profit for. In this story, the aliens came and offered advanced technology, which could cure diseases and make work easier. And what rich people in this book did was that they made it their own and made it impossible for the rest of society to access said advanced technology. It's scary how this book can be so ridiculous at times, but at the same time be so true to current events. I'm just really glad that I got to read those reviews saying that it was a satire, because my ignorant ass would have just thought it was the worst book ever and wouldn't have been able to pick up on its better elements. So, yeah. The last book that I read is Elmer by Jerry Alangilan. I read this book for the category a manga or graphic novel, and this is a graphic novel. Jerry Alangilan is a Filipino writer and inker and illustrator, and he actually recently just passed away. Rereading this book felt heavier this time around. So Elmer it's a story that follows two generations. It follows Jake in the present day, and Jake's father, Elmer, just died, and so he's gifted his father's journal where his father has documented his entire life. The next perspective is Elmer himself, and it follows him throughout his life. I'm sorry, I'm not describing this well. Basically, Elmer is about the story of chickens.
Chickens? Birds! Oh, wait. Birds.
One day, chickens just became just as smart as humans. Like, they could talk, they could think like us. Basically, they were like us, but chickens. So throughout this comic, we follow Elmer as he goes through a changing world, about a world that's shocked and frightened and coming to terms with this new evolution of species. You think that the story about talking chickens would be ridiculous? It was actually a very heavy and emotional read. I wrote some words here, let me read them. So I wrote here that the book was compelling and visceral. This book, and I'm not being dramatic here, it tackles humanity and how we become when faced with certain situations. What becomes of humanity when this happens or that happens. Anyone who has ever been treated as other can actually see a part of themselves in Elmer's story. It's amazing how there can be such a deep discussion about humanity in a story about a chicken. And that just speaks of how ingenious Jerry Allen Gillen is. His writing is impeccable and his illustrations are also divine. This is the second time I've read this book and it doesn't get any less heavier and it doesn't get any less, significant to the times, because facing discrimination and trying to find oneself in a world that doesn't seem to want you, that's still a very significant topic nowadays. It's just a very ingenious way of putting this into discussion. Where is humanity when it comes to dealing with people that are not like me? Because sometimes you want to think that we're better people than we are, but we can't really tell until we're put in the spot where we have to act as we say. This is a work of art, a work of genius, and this is Jerry Allen Gillen's legacy, and it's a very good legacy. So that was it for my January wrap-up video. I'm really glad I got to film this, despite just having woken up, and I haven't even brushed my teeth yet, but y'all can't smell that through the screen, so whatever.